step by step, we're going there. But of course, we're in the beginning stages, so that makes it more difficult.
Yeah. And when you spoke about co-pilots and assistants and agents, I know, Freek, we discussed this before as well, agents. What do you see as the most interesting use case or interesting avenue that we could explore?
Yeah, so at Bolt, I do have to, if I think back to your question there, I think the company as a whole is more in the optimization already. Big tech-focused B2C company. Obvious use cases are customer service, where you see that 85% of all queries can be answered and taken care of by the AI alone. So in that sense, the company, in the broader sense, has already, adopted it in a very deep level and is really just looking at how can we optimize it further. Within, I think, finance and treasury, we're a little bit slower. Maybe that's natural, to be honest. One place we do see it develop now is in our accounts payable, where a new account payable tool we are implementing uses AI, to read invoices and enter all that data automatically, interact also with the supplier, because the supplier gets access to the system. So there's also an agentic element to it.
Well, that assumes that there are barriers and that you're not integrated or aligned. It's not necessarily integration, but alignment, I think, is important. Treasury very used to dealing with tax. Often as this morning was mentioned, tax and treasury often go together. But as you go across the CFO responsibilities, particularly I think to FP&A, I think the alignment between treasury and FPA becomes a little bit stretched. And if you think about the treasury world, which is one of often the nuts and bolts of the balance sheet, of the funding, of the liquidity management, of the bank accounts, and the FPA has these outputs, high-level outputs of the financial results. So, how do we integrate or align better, I think? And based on my experience, one of the most recent companies I worked for, we had over 1,600 legal entities in 100 countries around the world. It's a crazy number, but that was the business model, risk management model. But so you had this process whereby you had your accounting goes into consolidation once a month, then consolidation do their stuff, and then the FP&A takes over and then they produce their report. So by the time you have this output compared to what the inputs are, Treasury, you look at this and say, well, what's the relevance? And in my experience, Treasury has to have a role in each step along the way. And that, and how easy that is or how difficult it is depends on how integrated you are in terms of processes. And as an example, in this company that I mentioned, you had such a large number of legal entities. When the consolidation had completed their first round of consolidation, I'd go to them and say, can I look at it now? And they say, well, why do you want to look at it? And I say, well, because we need to check on the balance sheet. I can't tell you if the sales are right, but just to look at the balance sheet. And to start off with, they didn't understand it, but then I would go back to them and say, look, it's just as well you haven't sent this forward because I can see this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong because of the validation process based on what Treasury was expecting and what actually came out. And as you go through that process, you then go to the FP&A, and FP&A generally has somewhere at the appendix a P&L and a balance sheet, and again, Treasury should be part of that exchange of what's coming out. Not necessarily, we can't talk about markets, we can't talk about product sales, but in that respect, I think Treasury does have a role to play in validating, and how easy that is depends on how integrated you are.
Data is of course expensive, and this model uses a lot of data. So in the beginning, after our first run, we had a look, and then it became a very costly model if we would keep it like that, because the data usage was enormous, and it took I think 5-6 hours to run the model and to store, and it was impressive, but I think that was really nice. So that then quickly everybody adapted to see, in the end, it should not only be a cost saving at the front and not a very big cost at the back, but then we started to look at iterations, and in the end we have now a model that runs in 40 minutes we can do the whole calculation. And that is actually quite important because we do a monthly recalculation.